Welcome back to tutorial number 3. Let's get right into it. Last time we had just British, or we had just Germans in here. Now we're actually going to get 2 opposing forces. I will be playing the Germans, and this is my task force. A convoy, and the scenario describes it as 3 merchant ships. Norway is neutral, and this is where Germany is getting its iron. And the British are blockading, and they want to interdict our ships. And with that, they have their task force. Fast-moving cruisers. We are a very slow convoy versus very fast cruisers. And the object for us is to get down here somehow and get into the port box. I'll explain that if we manage to get there, or if I don't, I'll try to remember to do that. So how are we going to get from here to here? So the scenario will end if I'm a station in the same spot with him. That just means they board our ships and we lose. So how are we going to get from here to here? Well, we could just start going like this. But now there's a problem, because we've introduced new rules, and that rule is intel. And it basically says that anytime one of my trajectories enters an enemy space that is either a station, what's going to happen? Oh, it's going to get an intel marker attached to it. And what this is going to allow him to do, the British, is to do let's call it a signals action. That's the new action we're adding to this rule set. And really, if he declares a signal action, it immediately he targets any segment with an intel marker, and it just removes all the trajectories, and boom, he's won. So we need to come up with something else. Well, we could. I should point out that the British are controlled by die rolls, bots, AI, and I'll show you that in a moment. But if it was player versus player, that would be the first thing he'd do. I'd get intel on that, and I'd just signals action and it'd be over. So let's try something else. We could go try to go around him, but once again, because not only does a station trigger intel, so does a British port, or an enemy port, or an enemy airfield. So in that case, that would get an intel marker. And I should point, they don't stack. You only get 1 intel marker per segment. So even though that's an airfield and a port, you wouldn't get 2 intel markers on that one segment. You can, however, and I'll show you. And we'll show you. Show, don't tell, right? Let's say we're going the long way around. Gandalf, we could pass the lines of Moria. Yeah, okay. And we're going around, and we're going around, and around, and around. Brest is actually, even though it's a French port, it's still considered enemy. That would invoke an intel. And if we kept going with the trajectories, there's a British enemy port, enemy airfield, that would get an intel. And one of these, there's yeah. So you can see, you can only have 1 intel marker per segment, but you can have any number of intel markers whenever you're in enemy things, ports, airfields, stations, and also U-boats and submarines. Now, it could go the long way around, but there's another problem. And that introduced another rule for us, because the question that comes up, okay, it seems like so easy for him to catch us when there's intel markers on our trajectory. Is there a way to get rid of these intel markers? And the answer is yes, there is. And that's called using a time lapse with invoking intel limit. Let me show you. Let's get all this off here. Let's say I just extended there. I just made a trajectory. We just shortened the trajectory. You're not under any obligation to go all the way to your destination with trajectories. They have a 15 segment limit, but you're under no obligation to go the maximum distance. Sometimes there's advantages to that, sometimes not. And that's part of the strategy as it gets deeper. Now, let's say I did that. What I can do, now I've made my trajectory. Now what usually happens is we pass, and when we pass, we get rid of trajectory segments. Normally, if you remember our box, let's see, let me see if I can pull my box up. Right here. Instead of moving the camera around, I'll just bring you the player aid. It's a nice one, by the way. Very easy to follow. You can see in good weather, it is good weather, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. We remove 2 segments. And we can remove segments from either side, like that. And you would think, oh, I can move them from this side. No, you can't. You cannot remove an Intel marker with regular time lapse. You have to invoke Intel limit. And you can see there, invoking Intel limit will allow you to remove a segment with an Intel marker on it, and you can only remove one. And you can see we're very slow, so we only get to remove one trajectory. So what I could do is say, okay, I moved in here, I invoked Intel limit, and I got rid of that. And of course I pass, and of course now he's going to make a trajectory to here and come after us. And that brings up the question, how should we get around this guy? So let's try this. I really don't want to have an Intel marker in the space with him. That just feeds him the victory. And what I may do, I don't want to really go a long way. That's just a lot of Intel to be whacking as I go along. What I'm thinking of doing, we go up here, start up here, go here, take the Intel marker, and just stop. Now, and I'll just pass, and I'll pass, and I'll pass, and I'll invoke the Intel limit. And I'll go ahead and remove that little chunk. And pass. We pass to the British. Now, like I said last time, every time initiative changes hands, we got to roll, check the weather. 4, it only changes on a 6, weather stays the same. So the British, what are the British going to do? Okay. Like I said before, I think they're controlled by a chart here. We're going to roll a dice on it, and it has for weather and good weather and bad weather. So we're going to roll on this column here 1d6. And there's a 3. And a 3 yields an S result. Well, what does the S result say? Well, okay. Signals. The British performs a signals action. If more than one Intel marker is attached to a task force, select the closest one to the British task force segment or station. If the British maintain initiative, they perform a trajectory action to the German station. If signals action can't be performed because the German task force does not have an Intel marker, which we don't, treat as a T result instead. All right, I'm tired of holding that book up, so I'm going to go back here. So the T action, the trajectory action. The British task force performs a trajectory action. Roll a die. If it is even, okay, let's go ahead and just roll it now. It's odd. If even, they would extend the trajectory to the nearest German segment with an Intel marker, or the nearest German task force segment, if there isn't an Intel marker. If odd, extend to Wilhelmshaven, I don't know how to pronounce that, and apply the pass result. Okay, so it was odd. So what the British are going to do is this. Now, they could go either way. Like so. So what they're going to try to do is head us off at the pass. Instead of going right for us, they're going to come over here and wait for us. And now they perform the pass action. And they're very fast. They would normally remove 4 segments. We only have 3. And there they are now. And they pass. They pass to us. We check the weather. 6. It does change to bad. Okay, the weather has changed to bad. Oh, that could be interesting. We might be able to win this. Okay, so like I said before, we just have to get to either one of these ports. And since we know he's here, we're just going to go there. Let's go where you're not. Trajectory action right there. And now we pass. Now, remember when we pass, when there's bad weather, the time lapse is actually a die roll. So 1d6, and we will remove 2 trajectories. Oh, by the way, he would have had to invoke intel limit as well. I made a mistake back there. Let me just for the sake of being complete, they were like, here, I'll just remember. They were like this. The second they went into this German port, they should have got an intel marker. Like that. Then they'd have passed. Would they have? They probably would not invoke the intel limit. I kind of don't think. I think they would. Oh, what would they do? Let me think about it for a sec. Yeah, let's let him invoke the intel limit. He's fast. His intel limit is 2 in this case rather than 1 like us, which gives us a real problem. So we'd be able to remove this. And he remove 1 more. Let's just say he removes that one. So there he is now. And let's do our move again. Remembering all that. There, there, there. Okay. Actually, I looked again. The pass action for the British. Now, when removing segments due to time lapse, remove the ones furthest from Wilhelmshaven. I have to look that up. How to pronounce that? I think they would have actually just left the intel marker here, because we can't do anything to him, and he's supposed to stay as close as there as possible. So we'll just leave that on for now. Normally, you don't want to do that too much because you're just giving up information. So we've done this like this, and now we're going to do a pass action, and it was 2 segments from the weather roll, so there wasn't any difference between good weather and bad weather for us, and we pass, and the initiative goes to the British. When the initiative changes, we check for the weather. Changes on a 5 or a 6, it's a 2. Weather is still bad. Okay, now we're going to roll to see what the British do now. They roll a 5 on the bad weather chart, and that indicates a pass action. And an intel limit. Yes, he's just going to pass here. Now we'll remove both of those. And there he is. And I don't know if I explained the rule. I did not. Stations never have intel markers on them. Only trajectories do. So he passes to us. We check the weather. It's still bad. We have our trajectory. There's no other move for us than to pass. We're slow, so we only get to remove 2 of these. So we're inching our way towards port. We pass initiative to the British, and the British check for weather, and the weather does change back to good. 5 or a 6 will change the weather. What are they going to do? We roll a dice again on the good weather chart. 4 indicates a signals action. Well, they can't do a signals action because there's no intel markers on them, so they're going to do a trajectory action. And let's see. Oh, that's interesting. So they're always going for this port here, even though I can easily just go through here. Did I not pass through that? Wait a minute. Hang on. I may have made a mistake here. Hold on one sec. No, I think I'm good. I was a little worried about this little gray section here. I thought maybe this wasn't adjacent to that and I couldn't go through that way. But no, that only applies like over other spaces. Okay, anyway. He's going to do a trajectory action. Did he roll even or odd? I can't even remember. I think that was the weather roll. I can't even remember. Hang on. Okay, mistake. Yeah, mistake back here. When the weather was bad, I was supposed to roll a dice to see how many trajectories to remove from my task force, instead of just removing 2. To correct it, let's just say I rolled a 2 and be done with it, so we can move on. I have not rolled for the odd or even whether he's going to go for my fleet. I should override the thing and say just go for the fleet. We'll let the dice decide. You know, it's odd. It's he's going to be sticking in Wilmslow and right here. So he passes like that, and that's all he does, and it passes initiative to us. We check the weather. It stays good. We will obviously pass. Get rid of 2, and the weather is good, so I'm not screwing that up now. And we only got 1 guy in here. We pass. British check the weather. Red die. It stays good. And now we get to see what they do. Let's see if they're too late. They roll a 5, which will be a trajectory action. And they're going to go for our trajectory. So we slap down a trajectory there. Remember, this is a German enemy port. They do get an intel marker attached. Now here's the thing. There's a canal here. I don't know if I mentioned that in the beginning. Only the Germans can use this, so they can't go from here to here. They have to go around. They have to go here. And then here. And get an intel marker. Because there's an airfield there. And I guess, does that count as a port here for that? It probably does. I'd have to double check that. I was looking for, there's no dot there, but there is a kind of a blue thing indicating there's the main box. Okay. So they made their trajectory move. Now they got to pass. Interesting, though, because they got 2 intel markers, and whenever you invoke intel limit, you can only remove 1 intel marker. And so, and you can't, like, remove the middle one. You can't make holes. And they can't do regular time lapse because you can't remove this one or this one because they have intel markers on. So they got to do the intel limit. And it would make sense to remove this and this. And that's their pass. That leaves us with 1 trajectory marker. We have only 1. Oh, well. what I could do, what I can do is just pass and turn into a station like this. But now we got to get into the rule about the port box, because it's not enough just to get here like that in a station like that. So we have to move to the port box. The port box is actually over here. Well, let me pop it off. So we're here, and all the ports are over here, and this is the box we're trying to get into. Like so. And we'll, come on. But we're like this. We can't go into the port box as a trajectory. We have to be a station first. Now, the nice thing is, when you're in a station and it's still your initiative, you haven't passed, you can bounce between the port box and the port on the map as much as you want. The advantage to being in the port box is you can't be victim of an airstrike or a naval search and whatnot. The enemy can't do many actions against you while you're in that port box, so you're completely safe. But of course, you can't do anything either. And if you pass, if I were to pass here and turn into a station, I can't. The second I made that pass, I'd turn into a station, but I've already given up the initiative, so I can't move to the port box. So I would need to endure another British roll, and that might kick me and go bad for me. So what I could do is trajectory through the canal to avoid that, but I think that's just gonna kind of bounce us back and forth in a kind of a cat and mouse thing until somebody rolls correctly. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do that. I'm just going to go ahead and pass right there. And the British are going to get a roll on it. Whether it goes to bad, that's interesting. Okay. And what are the British going to do? They roll a 1. That indicates a signals action, but that means a trajectory action. They're not going to move from here. What they're going to do is just pass, intel limit, boom, they got us. And I think that's really it for as far as the new rules here. Now, I do want to point out, that whenever a station is here and say, this is just for this scenario that the British found our boats and interdicted them. But it seems like in a lot of regular games, just because you're here and you're here, that doesn't mean you're found. You still got to make contact. You still got to draw them into battle. There's all things. So there's still a chance of getting away, just not in this scenario. So that's really it. We covered intel limits. We can kill intel markers and intel limits. We covered the port box, and we covered the new signals action for hunting down people with intel markers on them. And I'll see you in the next episode.